I wrote this sermon in preparation for Super Bowl Sunday. So, not going to lie, didn't write a new sermon this week. I tweaked it though. Often when I finish giving a sermon, I think back and go, I could have said that better. So you're getting, the final draft after an extra week of work. And what I was going to say about the Super Bowl is even more true this week. So what I was going to say is that in this culture, we focus on what I like to call bigger, better, much more, new, next. Say that really fast. Bigger, better, much more, new, and next. Right? That's what we focus on. And so you heard about the Super Bowl all week long. And it's not just a Super Bowl game. I heard that we actually watched, if we watched, which I didn't, 17 and a half minutes of football in a 4-hour program. Right? So this week, what I wanted to say is that we highlight these super athletes, or we highlight these celebrities, or musicians, or politicians, or people in the news who have, who are part of the bigger, better, much more, new, and next culture. And this week, one of those got called out, right? For telling untruths. Finally, our media is getting wise, and yet the media is part of the deal, right? Why aren't they giving us the other side of the story about vaccinating children? Why aren't they giving the other side of the story about American Sniper? When are bigger, better, much more, new, and next called out? Well, if this text is to be part of who we are, then this community is what calls out that focus on bigger, better, much more, new, and next. Because the body isn't just about the biggest and the best. It's not just about what's presentable, what's good looking, what's functional, what's the best that we are. The body is about all our parts. They say the appendix is dispensable, so they take it out whenever. Now, you can live without it, granted, but it's become known that the appendix is part of our line of defense, right? Same thing with our tonsils, right? You can take them out, you can live without them, but we're minus that part of our defense. There may be parts of the body that we think are dispensable. A little toe, we don't need the little toe. Ask someone who's lost a toe what it feels like to walk. So, if we are to honor this text as a community of faith, if we are to attend to those parts that are less than, or not as honorable, or what we sometimes would say are more insignificant or less significant, we are truly a countercultural body. And if we do that as a community, what an attraction we will be to the world out there who's hurting and needs to belong, but feels they can't live up to the standard of bigger, better, much more, new, and next. So how do we do that? Some people call this bearing one another's burdens, and I think we do that pretty well in some obvious ways. If someone's in the hospital, comes home, we might bring them a meal. We might go for a visit. We might send them a card. If someone's, not here for a while, we might call them up and say, we've missed you. Or we might send an email and say, hey, is everything okay? Someone needs a ride somewhere, we might pick them up. Those are obvious kinds of things. But how do we get to the not so obvious kinds of things? Now let me talk about what this burden image is. Some people say, well, I bear this heavy cross, and I need help bearing this heavy cross. Or I've taken up my cross, and it's my diagnosis, my health condition. It's my incapacity. It's my deficiency. That's not what taking up a cross is. That's not the kind of burden we're talking about here. Taking up your cross is when you see an injustice and injustice in the world, and you take it on voluntarily. That's not a health concern. That's not the result of an accident. That's not the result of some deficiency in the way you've been created, and we all have them, by the way. Taking up your cross is a different kind of burden. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is being human. We all have a weakest link. We all have something that we fear, something that we struggle with, some inadequacy. It could be because of an accident or a health issue. But more than likely, it's the way we were created. To call the obvious, some of us are afraid of spiders or snakes or mice. Some of us are afraid of being alone, or of losing a loved one, or of losing our jobs. Those are much harder things to see, right? If I see a mouse, but I can deny forever that I'm afraid of being alone just by being with people. So the first step in attending to this community, the first step in bearing one another's burdens, is to realize our own burdens. Where are we fearful? Where do we struggle? Where do we get anxious? How is it that we feel less than? Many of those things we can admit. I mentioned, if you're sick, if you've had an accident, those are obvious. But, there are some real hidden anxieties and fears. Mental illness, addictions. We're less likely to talk about those kinds of things because there's a stigma attached to them. Still, even though we think we're very open. So the first thing is knowing our inadequacies. The second thing is refraining from judgment because we know our own inadequacies. And everybody's got them. And guess what? They're not the same as ours. And they're going to appear in other ways or be hidden in other ways. But we need to keep from judging because the community is not safe. If we make judgments about another's inadequacies, oh, they could keep that from happening. Oh, they could prevent that. Oh, they could do something about that. The text doesn't say, judge the part of your body or the part of your personalities that's inadequate and fix it. The text says we need all the parts of the body, and the weakest ones, the least honorable ones, might be the most important. Well, why would that be? I'll just let you ruminate on that because we're going to get there. So the first thing is know our own inadequacies. The second thing is refrain from judgment. The third thing is to become a listening community. We're given 2 ears and 1 mouth. Right? There's a reason for that. But the reality is that we think 4 times faster than we talk. So as I said that sentence, when I got to 4 times, you were thinking 4 times faster than what? Already. You were going to finish my sentence for me. That's what we do when people are sharing themselves with us. We've already got it figured out in our mind what we're going to say to them. That is not good listening, folks. Good listening is looking the other in the eye, not attending to whatever noise is happening out there. Good listening is not interrupting unless you don't understand something. Then you might say, could I just stop you for a second? Because I'm not sure I understood what you just said. Could you clarify that for me? So that we can listen well. This might seem like basic, but the American ambassador McDonald, retired, said that at the United Nations, Americans are known for their inability to listen. So a man said to his friend, you know, my wife, she just talks and talks and talks and talks. And his friend said, well, what does she talk about? And the man said, I don't know, she never says. That's often how we listen, right? So listening is a skill that we need to develop, but we have to have something to listen to. And that's where self-disclosure comes in as part of attending. So this is not going to be a safe community unless we've developed the skill to disclose our vulnerabilities and our weaknesses, and we've come to find that this community is a trustworthy place, that people will listen without sharing it beyond that conversation. Nobody wants their vulnerability as headlines on the Tower Topics. So being able to disclose or live, because you're disclosed, I hate to tell you, being able to live in a safe place without judgment, where someone will listen kindly and not seek to fix whatever they hear. It's about caring, not curing. Right? So caring is, wow, that sounds really tough. Or, I don't know what I would do in that situation. Or, wow, sounds like you're in a lot of pain. Or you're grieving, or it hurts, or you're anxious, or you're fearful. Not, you know, I did that. I was there at one point. You'll get through it. Or, you know, if you just tried this or that, if you just did that thing or the other thing, it would all go away. Caring is about being there. In the Stephen Ministry Program, they say, helping, 90% of helping is showing up. It's often not about doing anything, but just about being a listener. There's this new effort in our world. It's called the Story Project. Have you heard of it? The Story Project is a NPR series where people tell their stories, and they're published on the radio. And just by having communities tell their stories, healing takes place. So, knowing our own vulnerabilities, refraining from judgments, listening and self-disclosing our chicken and the egg, right? We got to, you know, go one step deeper on each side, be willing to share a little more, become a little better listener, then we can share a little more. Our listening will allow people to share a little more as we practice it. These are the ways that we attend to one another, that we bear one another's burdens. And as we share, and as we understand our inadequacies, those of this community, we can better figure out what to do about them, if anything. Sometimes we just need to allow them to be. Because those who are weak in one area have a lesson for those who are weak in another area. For those who are not physically able, for instance, they remind us that it isn't about your physical ability, whether you're lovable or not. For those who lack in social graces, they remind us that it's not about social graces that makes us lovable or not. For those with those inadequacies that they prefer to keep hidden, addictions, mental illness, other things that people struggle with, they remind us that those things that we struggle with are not what make us lovable or not. We are lovable because we are, in all our strengths and weaknesses. This is a countercultural idea. The world doesn't get this. The world wants to fix all our weaknesses. The world wants to hide weakness. The world doesn't accept people just as they are. Look at advertising. But people want to be accepted for just who they are. People are longing to be accepted for just who they are and nothing more. And if we become known for that, the people will pay to get in here. Well, now there's an implication for the broader community as well. I think racism is still a problem because we've made a judgment about what's normal. And we've expected others to live up to that standard. Instead of saying, we all have our own normal. And just because another subculture doesn't have the same normal that we do, doesn't mean they're less than. And so accepting folks right where they are. None of us had ancestors who lived 200 years in slavery. We have no concept of the DNA that African Americans carry around inside them. We have no concept of the hurdles. So to make judgments, completely unfair. What we need to do is just accept people where they are. Just love them up where they are. I think when we come to this table, we get a taste of this reality that we're all equals. We all come to this table inadequate. We haven't lived up to God's standards for us. We haven't, God made us to be God's children, to follow, to live into the call that's placed on our lives, and none of us have done that perfectly. And when we come to the table, we get the message that it doesn't matter, that you get to eat and drink, you get to partake in God's grace, regardless of whether you've met the standard or not. We come here to eat and drink as equals. February is Black History Month. Cornell West, PhD from Princeton, the first African American in 1980, taught at Princeton and Harvard and Union Theological Seminary. He says this encouraging word about moving forward as equals in the foreword to the New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. He says, sleepwalking, and he's referring to that acceptance of bigger, better, much more, new and next, like it's the way it is. He says the sleepwalking is slowly but surely coming to a close. as more and more citizens realize that the iron cage they inhabit, maybe even a golden cage, is still a form of bondage. This indifference promotes a superficial ethic of success. Money, fame, and pleasure. Bigger, better, much more, new and next. That leaves too many well-adjusted to injustice. Martin Luther King Jr. called for us to be love-struck with each other. To be love-struck with each other, not colorblind toward each other. To be love-struck is to care, to have deep compassion, to be concerned for each and every individual, including the poor and the vulnerable. We come to this table as equals.